What's going on, guys? Mitch here, and today we're hanging out in the office, and I wanted to kind of give you my fairly, short to medium-term impressions on the 2023 S-Works Tarmac SL7. This is going to be more of a casual conversation. I'm going to show you a bunch of different things on the bike. If you've been following the build series, you will have seen a lot of these little things in detail. This is in no way formal, and I'm kind of just doing this off the cuff. So if I do make any mistakes, certainly point them out. Otherwise, we're just going to kind of go over the bike, review it, and right now, as I'm filming this anyway, we've got about 1,000 kilometers on this exact build. Now, if you'll remember last year, I did, I think I've got 3,000, 4,000, or 5,000 kilometers on a standard Specialized Tarmac SL7, which was available. So this is nothing new to me. I've ridden the bike, the design, for quite some time, and I think that I'm more than qualified to give you my opinion of the bike. Now, I've been getting asked a lot here for comparison of this bike versus the Specialized Aethos. I'm going to have to do a video on that because these two bikes are so similar yet so different, and a lot of people definitely want to see the difference between an Aethos and a Tarmac SL7, as I think a lot of people actually do want to buy one of each or both, and I think I'm qualified to kind of give you that opinion. So anyway, without further ado, I'm going to start gibbering on about this bike, and hopefully find some of it useful, some of it garbage, and some of it kind of in between. But as always, this is not sponsored content. This is, I bought everything here and handpicked the entire build. And obviously I picked it for a reason, whether it be discounted or performance oriented. So anyway, let's kick this off and get started. So let's kick things off with the wheel set discussion. So this is a Reval Rapide CLX2. This wheel set was hand selected for a number of reasons, mainly because due to it being a 61 centimeter frame. I'm a heavier guy. I'm about 205 pounds. I want to run road tubeless, and for me, the reliability, the warranty, all that good stuff with the wheel set is terrific. But the main attraction to me, anyway, was the fact that it was a hooked tubeless design. And if you think about hooked versus non-hooked, I ran the Zip 404s as a non-hooked version last year, and right around 70 psi was the max that I could run. So I decided that. I tended to want to go run 28s versus going to the 30Cs, where you could lower the pressure down a little bit, increase the volume, yada, yada, yada. In this regard, I definitely preferred these wheels over the Zip 404s for that reason, because I am a heavier guy, being 6'3", 205 pounds. I definitely prefer having the hook design where I can run these guys right up to, pretty standard right now, 28C. I'm running them right around 80, 85 psi on the daily. No problems. One of my big draws to this wheel set as well is the fact that, front and rear, they are two different widths and depths. So in the front, you've got a really, really wide, I want to say right around 30 mil rim width. And so with that, you get the tire that basically just sits right outside, the tire sits inside the rim, which is very rare. So the tire itself, or the rim itself, is external to the tire when everything's mounted up, and it's kind of trippy at first when you see it, but I'll show you here. So hopefully that's able to show that what I'm talking about, but as we're seeing in here, you can see that the tire is actually inside the rim. So from an aerodynamic standpoint, there's a bunch of advantages that they say is present here. I don't know whether or not to believe that, but I will say that after a whole season of training, that I'm getting PRs all over the place. Now, whether that's training or the bike, I'll leave that for you to decide. From my experience, the equipment's a very small percentage of the difference, but so far, I'm really liking the wheel set. Now, I'm going to kind of lump together a bunch of parts here because we already talked about the wheel set. Drivetrain is a SRAM red drivetrain with a ceramic speed pulley wheel, oversized pulley wheel, which is great. I've gone with a 10 to 28 tooth cassette, which has been awesome. And then the Asioma Duo power meter pedals. Now, this drivetrain is awesome. No issues. Is it comparable to SRAM Force? Absolutely. I would even say it shifts as smooth as their lower end group set, being the, what is that? It's not the Force, but it's the insert name here, Rival, I guess is what it would be. So I believe they share a lot of the same motors, And the only difference really is weight and I guess precision. But from my perspective, you know, I've ridden the Rival, the Force, and now the Red. They're all fine. They're all good. A lot of the parts are interchangeable. In fact, all the axis parts are interchangeable, so it's solid. No issues there. What else would I change here? Well, I guess the one thing I'd change on the front derailleur is that it's a bit finicky to set up. Some people complain about dropping chains and whatnot. I'll be completely honest with you, I haven't had that issue, but I also meticulously set this up and don't have any concerns there. Obviously on the cockpit I went with the NV Aero Road bars. These are absolutely exceptional, both in stiffness and weight. I will say that you can definitely notice them cutting through the wind, and it's definitely something I really enjoy. But you know, the main thing here, if you go with I think I went with a 42 centimeter bar. The main takeaway here is the fact that you're really running like almost like a 37 centimeter bar in the hoods. So from an aero perspective, you're just cutting your reduction right through the wind, right off the hop. And to me anyway, it's just narrower is faster. And it is 42 centimeters, but that's way down in the actual drops. So pretty cool bar. My original pick was actually the Revolve to match the wheel set, which weren't available, but I would do these again in a heartbeat. And now I believe they're actually drilled to accept direct mount through the stem or something, some internal routing. So maybe you can get these at a bargain like I did, but yeah, no issues with the bar. Okay, now that we've got some of the bike parts out of the way, which I think is kind of important to discuss kind of how you arrived at the build that you like, you know, I wanted to get into the frame itself. So what's the difference between an S-Works and a standard Specialized Tarmac SL7? It's this right here. So I don't know if the camera's actually going to pick that up, but as you can see, it is 12R carbon. Specialized doesn't do a very terribly great job of telling you what that is, but I would assume when you go from a 9 to a 10 to an 11 to a 12, you're increasing the thread count. Think about it as the same 8 by 11 piece of paper, just with more threads per inch. That's what I would think it is. I'm not sure, or if it's different epoxy or whatever, but I think it's a higher weave count. Cross-check me on that. Would love to hear in the comments. But anyway, let's talk about that bike from a biking perspective, and let's actually get into the frame versus just the parts that actually hang on it. Okay, so as we can see, this is a fairly unique frame. It is a frame-only color in that it's got some pinks, some purples, some blues, some turquoise, a bunch of things in it that, you know, I think look pretty awesome, pretty sharp, and definitely make it unique out on the road. In terms of the bike handling performance, from a 12R, which is this bike, to a 10R, which is the Tarmac SL7 from last year, do I notice a difference? Not really. There is a difference in weight, and I would even say at that, you know, it's the difference between having ultralight tubes versus standard tubes. It's not as big of a difference as you'd think. For twice the price, you know, to save, I don't even want to put a number on it, but I want to say it's in the conversation of, you know, 150, 200 grams per frame, in that kind of range, I'm guessing, so half a pound. In the ride quality, you don't really notice it. When you're hitting bumps every day, you're 2 hours into a ride, I don't think you're going to notice that half pound. What you'll do is when you will notice it, is when you have that get up and go mentality, where that extra half pound at a very low sprung spot on the bike, remember, it's not just the weight up top on the top tube, but it's also the weight down in the down tube, the chain stays. When you can reduce these areas, that side to side, you know, full out sprinting balancing, that's where you notice it. For me anyway. Ride quality, not as much. But get up and go, side to side sprinting, absolutely you do notice the difference. Every other quality, I would say, on the bike, from the cable routing is identical, the derailleur hangers, the axles, the bearings, the aero stem spacers, all that stuff is identical. Actually, you know what? There is one difference. The stem, I believe the hardware was all titanium instead of stainless. So if that's worth the money, then it is for you, whatever. But they do come with that stem, by the way. But all the other spacers, even the seat post was an S-Works seat post on the Specialized comp that I had. Now, you might be wondering, from a fit and finish perspective, which bike is a little different. Now, I will say this. I do think that S-Works has a higher grade finish to it than standard Specialized. And you do notice it when you're putting in, like, say you're threading in the bottom bracket, or sliding the seat post in, or routing the derailleur cables. I just felt like building the bike up, it was at a higher finish level. And that could have just been this particular bike. I don't know. But from my perspective, I felt like the quality of the materials just felt better in hand. The clear coat, the paint, it just seems, you know, if to me, if we're rating this a 10 out of 10, I would say that the standard finish is like an 8.5 out of 10 by comparison. It's close, but you do notice a difference. Now, the head tube, I will say, because it is lighter, typically you get more flex. And that, to me, is the point on the bike where you do notice the most flex is the head tube. I haven't felt like that has been a change at all. I don't know if they lay these things up with a certain fatigue life or a certain test rating of flexibility, or what would you call it, like parameters of allowed flexibility built into the design based on material. But I will say this, the head tube on this bike is solid, it's stiff, and I would even argue that it's lighter, that it's a stiffer front end. So from a ride perspective on the rest of the bike, it's very similar, but I will say that because it is a racing bike, it is a very, very stiff ride, which is a good thing. Now, my question is on the actual fork. I am curious about this because I haven't been able to actually find an answer on this. So a few years ago, discussing forks, I talked about on the Specialized Aethos and how when I started hammering on the bike, I noticed that there would be some flex. You know, when I'm talking a side-to-side sprint, I can't remember my exact verbiage, but I talked about on side-to-side sprinting, I would feel that there would be some flex in the fork, and I'd get a little pad-to-disc rub, okay? Now, I didn't get that on last year's bike, on the Tarmac SL7 Specialized. I'm starting to get that on this bike. Now, I said earlier, and I'm totally contradicting myself, in that the front end is stiffer. It feels stiffer. But the fork, I don't know if there's a compensation factor here where because they made the head tube stiffer and made it more, more responsive to power input, that they had to maintain the ride, they made the fork lighter. I don't know, but I do notice that the one little drawback that I have on the S-Works, and remember, 205 pounds here, if you're 130, you may not experience this, is that I do get a little rub when I am doing, 1500 watt sprints. Not a big deal, but it is something to mention that if, these little things do bug you, then that certainly could be something that to take note of. I certainly love how they've integrated the cables and done cable management. It's a home run for me. I hope they don't change that. It's actually quite simple once you know how to do it. When I was putting this bike together, it was kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back the whole way. But now that I know how to do it, it's pretty ingenious, and I love it. And I know I'm running it at grandpa height. I'm actually probably going to lower it down here as the summer goes on. But I'm a big fan of how they do their spacer system. And if you want more content on that, I encourage you to check out the Tarmac SL7 playlist, where you can see how it all went together. Now, the seat post, as I talked about, is the exact same between the S-Works and the regular version. I will say this, the one thing that I felt was kind of cheaply done is this little collar here. Now, it's a piece of rubber that covers the seat post, as you can see. So this is where you actually tighten down the seat post. It's just an expansion wedge that as you tighten it down, it pushes 2 pieces apart. I think this little piece of rubber is kind of, for a $7,000 bike frame, I think this is kind of meh. It's doesn't rattle or move or anything like that, but I definitely think it's just kind of whatever. I think these are the little bits and pieces that when you've done a bike 99% well, that 1% is going to be the hardest to get right. And these little details, well, it to me is one of them. Now the rest of the seat posts I don't have an issue with. I wish I could fit the Garmin a little easier, and that's more of a me thing with running the Varia. I wish there was a little bit better of a system where I could run the Varia perhaps under the saddle, but that's where I run a saddlebag. This is my everyday bike, as you know, so it sees everything from 30-minute jaunts in the park to full on 100-milers on the weekends. So I kind of just tend to run it with just about everything on it that I need. But in this particular case, I just wish that I could mount a Varia a little bit better. If that's something where there could be integrations or discussions, it'd be nice. The fact that it comes with a carbon rail as well as a tie rail. So basically when you think about the adapter there, all you're talking about is a round versus an oval rail. So it's nice that it comes with that, and I certainly appreciate that aspect of it. As I said earlier, a lot of the weight on the bike I feel like is very low. Now, when you're talking about weight being low, how does that benefit you? Well, it's anytime you're wrenching on the bike side to side. Think about the weight. Do you want it down in the bottom here or up higher? And if you want to, attach a 1-pound weight to your top tube and go and sprint, you'll notice right away why having the weight lower on the pivot point, which would be kind of, if you draw a line between your two axles, I think that would kind of be your pivot point. Having the weight there is really beneficial, and I really like how Specialized has done that while maintaining the aero profile of the bike. And the aero profile is something we haven't even talked about yet, but we'll get into now. So the aero profile of the bike is just, to summarize things, it's absolutely insane. And it's something that I didn't really realize I needed until you got on a Tarmac SL7 compared to the Aethos. The Aethos, great, awesome bike, really light. I love that thing. I've got almost 20,000 kilometers on mine now, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon. So don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this bike is better than that. But that aerodynamic edge, that you get a bike that's light-ish or light enough, and maybe you add a little bit of weight to it while maintaining its riding characteristics, and you allow that thing to punch through wind, and you look at the profile of these tubings and how everything's kind of just washed, like it just looks smooth and it looks like it wants to punch through things. I'm telling you, I'm Canadian, so I'm going to talk kilometers per hour, but right around 30 kilometers an hour, I notice on the Aethos there's a significant drop off where you're going through the wind and you start really fighting that aerodynamic, the wind that's hitting you. On this, you hit 30 kilometers an hour, you hit 35 kilometers an hour, you hit 40 kilometers an hour. It doesn't feel like the bike is fighting it. It just keeps asking for more and keeps pushing through the wind. And that is the one thing that I can't even, that is the best I can describe it to you guys. It's not something that I can write a paper about. You have to feel it. And you have to take the bike out and go, okay, I understand what he's talking about now, because I'm going 40 kilometers an hour and I feel like I'm working at the same level of going 33 or 32 or 31. You're just getting free speed when it comes to aerodynamics. And the Tarmac SL7 in any configuration, if it's the S-Works or the standard Specialized, is just no slouch. The tube shaping is incredible. You can see back behind the seat tube here, there's a nice little gap. Maybe I'll show that a little closer. So as you can kind of see here, there's a nice little gap, so you can fit a 32 mil tire in here, no problem, if you want comfort all day and maintain that aerodynamics. Or if you want to, I'm running 28s, or if you want to run 26s, 25s, you can punch this thing right down and it would just absolutely slice through the wind. And the seat tube is just, it's incredible. Like it literally cuts through the wind, and it's compared to a round tube. Maybe I'll show this from the front. Compared to a round tube, you look at everything on this bike, it's designed to cut through. So first of all, you look down the seat tube, it's a D shape. So why do you use a D, right? A D shape, right? It's to give you that good forward and aft flex while being able to squish in tight versus a round tube. So you cut through the wind better. And then that follows right through down all the design elements, right down the seat tube. It is super, super narrow. You look at the transitions from here, all the chain stays, everything is just super smooth, super seamless, and designed for that aerodynamic input. But then when you go down to the actual chainstays, because up here they're shaped almost like a rectangle, but very smooth. And then you go down to the chainstays on the bottom, and it changes back to kind of that round tubing. So as we can see here, it changes back to that round tubing, which I would assume, because where you're putting power into a bike, you want to avoid that twisting. You want to be able to tune the ride characteristics, and that's all handled down here. So you're shaping the tubing from this like super aero profile, lightweight, wind slicing profile, right down to this rounded off, super curved design. I just think they've done this really, really well. And it really shows in the riding, because it slices through the wind, yet absolutely handles power like, you know, like you've bolted a Hemi to a Dodge Challenger or something, and it can handle it so well, but at a much lighter weight, obviously. So everything on the frame is all internal here. So, you know, everything right from the top of your brake lines here, everything from the cockpit right down through the head tube, through the handlebar, into the stem, down the head tube, through the spacers, down the fork. This is the front brake line we're looking at here, but this is all internal. And they don't even give you an option to run a wired group set. So if you want to buy an S-Works frame and run Shimano 105 or 11 speed, you know, old school mechanical group sets, you don't have that option on this frame. It's all meant to be wireless. And I think I like that approach, because they're saying, look, this is our performance bike, and if you want a performance frame, you're going to have to run performance parts. So why add weight to the frame to give you the option to use lesser weight, lesser performance parts? It makes a lot of sense to me when you're looking at it from a macro perspective, but there will be the people that nitpick and say that, you know, I do want to run mechanical Dura-Ace, for example, or mechanical Ultegra on this S-Works, and unfortunately the frame will not allow that. But at the end of the day, what are you really paying for with this bike? It's this logo right here. To me, it's a staple of high performance. It's a staple of development, and a lot of money goes into that. And it might not seem like much when you're saving half a pound on a frame, but the S-Works program is heavily funded and has a lot of winning athletes on it, and they market the bikes, they market the entire program around it. So there has to be a cost to it, and unfortunately that is very representative in that logo right there. So you've made it this far into the video, I hope, and the question is obviously in the back of your mind: do I need a Specialized or an S-Works Tarmac SL7? And that's for you to answer. It makes no difference to me. I've had both, and comparing the two between one another, I will say this: the Specialized SL7 does absolutely everything that the S-Works does, but the S-Works does it just a little tiny, 5% better, maybe 10% better. But if you were to blindfold most riders and get them to back-to-back test both bikes and say, which do you prefer? I think most people would have a real tough time telling you which bike they're even on. They're so similar in so many different ways, from the build, the parts, the seat post, the stem, the head tube, the seat post, or the steer tube, the fork, the axles, all the little bits and pieces, the accessories, the cable routing. It's all so similar. Ride-wise, I would say it would be a wash. They feel the same to me, other than that little bit of tiny flex in the fork. I don't know if that's a thing or not, or if that's just me. More to come on that after I put another few thousand kilometers on it and kind of fiddle with the brake a little bit. But I think for the average person, buying something like a Specialized Tarmac SL7 Expert with a Rapide CL wheel set, carbon, is going to give you such a banger deal all around. At that, I think it's like a $10,000-ish or $8,000, $8 to $10-ish kind of price point depending on country. That to me is, if I were to buy one of these bikes again and just start ground up, I'd probably just start there, because you're getting a wheel set that's banging, you're getting really good shifting group set, You're getting all the mainstays on this bike, the seat post, the same fork, all the spacers, all that stuff. It's going to ride the same. Now, if it's performance, right? We just talked about the average person. Now, if it's performance you're after, this is going to be the bike you're going to want, because there are tangible gains to be made when you're climbing and you're setting PRs. Well, that weight does make a difference. If you're going to spend so much money on your parts across the entire bike, why wouldn't you spend the money and, you know, increase the entire overall scope of the package that much more? Like, if you're going to do it, do it. If you're not going to do it, don't do it. You know, I think that for an average person, you know, a standard SL7 with a real nice wheel set is going to get you 90% of the way there. But it's that last 10%. You have to do everything on the bike to get it. You've got to do carbon cranks. You've got to do OSPWs. You've got to do the high-end group sets. You've got to do the lightweight bits and pieces and bolts and grip tape. And like, you've got to do everything to eke out that last 10%, right? And that's what this frame is about. So if you're a performance seeker, that's what you're going to want. Right? And this is I'm not a racer, guys, and I'm on an S-Works, but I appreciate it. I truly appreciate what S-Works is doing here. And it's just nice to go out and be like, I want a Ferrari. I want to ride a Ferrari. And this is the Ferrari to me. And then there's also going to be people that want S-Works because it's like the M series BMW. It costs more money, and for that, you know, they throw some money at it and they feel affluent, and they just want to have it. And that's fine too. You know what? It'd be silly of Specialized to not offer that bike to someone who wants to throw the money down, because there are people that are going to buy this bike that might not necessarily utilize its performance. But for the vast majority of riders who ride S-Works, I will say that they're high performance seekers looking to eke out maximum levels of performance from minimal level of product, I suppose. So lightweight, good ride quality, precisionally made, good tech, good design to it, and good service and warranty. And that's, to me, what this bike really does well. So where does that put things for you? I don't know, but I will say this. You know, I'm loving the bike. I'm really enjoying it. You guys definitely need to check out the vlogs, because I show it all the time on the weekly basis. Is usually this bike in there for the next few months anyway. And then where's this bike going from here? Well, I think we're going to see the S-Works SL8, or the Specialized Tarmac SL8, coming out during the Tour de France. And from all things that I've heard, it's going to be a bit of a blend of the Tarmac, the Venge, and the Aethos. From what I've heard, it's going to be an Aethos rear end with a Venge head tube, so a deeper head tube, lighter rear end, and then maintaining a lot of the aero characteristics of the Tarmac SL7. I'm a firm believer where there's smoke, there's fire, and that's what basically everyone's been saying from what I've read online. Well, guys, I think I've talked about some good, some bad, some ugly on the bike, a little bit of everything. And I don't know what kind of time I'm looking at now, but I appreciate if you've watched the whole video and stayed and checked it out. If there's anything I've missed, or if there's anything that you want me to go more in detail on, please let me know. I'm more than willing to put that together. I've got nothing but time to do that. As well, I'm hoping to track down a Tarmac SL8 to compare that as soon as they're available, within reason, obviously. But that'd be a fun bike to compare against this, as well as the Aethos. Furthermore, I'd like to do a video of comparing this with the Aethos at some point here, which I think would be an awesome video for the average person. As I've discussed, it's something that I wish I would have been able to watch before buying them, because they are two very, very different bikes. But I think I will bookend things there on the initial impressions / short-term, midterm, first 1,000-kilometer review on the S-Works Tarmac SL7. Any questions, leave them below. Like, subscribe, share, hit me up. I read every comment. I will always reply. And let's nerd out on bikes. That's half the fun. And I appreciate you guys stopping by, watching the video, and all that stuff. Okay, Have yourselves a good week. Enjoy the ride on the weekend, and we will talk soon. Cheers, guys.